I love audiences in Canada. It's lunch outside, but everybody's still in here, so that's much appreciated. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's the first time I interview a fellow Dutchman on stage.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. We thought about doing it in Dutch, but for your benefit, we're just going to do it in English. GitLab is basically GitHub, right?
Started off like that, but it's grown into much more. We started off with just version control, CI, but now GitLab is a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, all the way to releasing, monitoring, securing, and defending what you made, including like planning what you're going to do, portfolio management, and things like that.
How much do you hate that people think it's the same as GitHub?
It's totally fine. It's our fault. Like, we started off like that, and the name is very similar.
So you're not going to change your name now that...
No, it's embedded in a lot of directories and URLs. We'll have to make... Just like Airbnb is not for renting an airbed anymore, we got to make sure that people get that GitLab is more.
Fair enough. Tell us a little bit about your story as an entrepreneur. I want to talk about remote work and all of that, but I think your own story is pretty interesting. What was your first business?
So my first business was open source infrared receivers. And it was a PhD student in my university who made them, and he had a GeoCities page, and on that page it said, I'm not selling these, but he was selling them at the local marketplace. So I started buying from him, asking people to email me dollar bills with some cardboard behind it in an envelope to the Netherlands, and I sent them the infrared receiver.
GeoCities page, so this is what, 99?
98, yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody remember GeoCities? Good. You just told me how old you are. That was probably not a very scalable business.
It was successfuler than we thought, but I want to get back to studying. And later on, I didn't start the business. I started the business, but I was never a shareholder in it. But I saw Submarine on a boat show. So for 5 years, we built recreational submarines. That's still going. So today, if you buy a submarine, you're most likely to buy it from U-Boat Works.
Recreational submarines.
Yeah, so you have a trailer, you have a submarine, and you can go diving. Or most people have a really large yacht, and they want to impress their guests, and you can take them out for a spin.
Do you have one?
No, we try to make them for $20,000, and we fail by 2 orders of magnitude, which is pretty bad. So they're $2 million, and upkeep is 10% of that a year.
So you got to wait for the IPO before you buy your own stuff.
Yes, and then still I might not buy them, but there's some cruises now where you can go on a cruise, and they have the submarines there.
How do you go from recreational submarines to CICD and developer tools?
In 2007, I saw Ruby, and I always wanted to get into programming. I saw Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and I looked at the code and I said, this is beautiful. This reads like poetry. This is the time to get into programming. So I was a self-taught programmer, started consulting, and then at a certain point I saw GitLab. It was a year old at that point, and all the tools I used were open source, except the collaboration tool I used. And I thought it makes so much sense for GitLab to take that place.
So you were a self-taught programmer at the time, basically?
Yeah, I just got the book, Ruby on Rails. It was really well written. I read it 5 times, and by that time I was pretty good.
Nice. Now, with GitLab, you went to do Y Combinator.
Yeah, and we bootstrapped. So we bootstrapped for 3 years on $100,000 I made of Bitcoin speculation. And then 2015, we went to Mountain View for Y Combinator. That was super helpful.
Recreational submarines, Bitcoin.
I like interesting things.
Apparently.
I'm motivated by interestingness.
How did you end up doing CICD, which is not the most interesting, exciting thing?
Plus
all the other things.
GitLab used to be version control. And then Dimitri never wanted to upgrade another Jenkins server again. So he made his own CI/CD platform. And then someone said, let's combine the two. And Dimitri was against it, I was against it, but he managed to convince us. So that's how we got into that business.
Nice. Was Y Combinator worth it for you?
It's very much worth it. It's 7% dilution. but you get $150. You get great advice from the mentors there. You get great peers. For us, a lot of our success is attributable to being inspired by the other people in our groups. And you raise at 2-3 times the valuation you would otherwise raise at.
At that point, did you already know you were going to do a remote company where you have absolutely no offices anywhere in the world?
Yeah, so we were just off 3 months of having the whole company in one house. So the whole company and my wife. It's remarkable how we survived. And then Y Combinator told us that the remote thing we were doing before worked for engineering, but not for sales and marketing and finance.
Right.
So we said, okay, that makes sense. So we got an office, and people started coming in. But they were there for like 3 days or something, and then they just started working from home because there were no rules about coming to the office, and everything we did was online anyway. They were on video calls the entire day. So there was no added value, and there was a 2-hour commute. So they just started working from home. So that's why we were remote, because people stopped showing up to the office.
At what time did you shut down the office?
I think we signed a lease for 3 years or something, and then we shut it down.
You were stuck, and at the end, somebody just turned off the light, the last person who still
Yeah,
showed
we
up.
moved. I also lived there because like real estate was super expensive. So I thought I'll take the upper floor, live there, then the company expands, I'll move out, and then the company expands more, and then I'll move back in and make it my home because it was such a long lease, but never had to move.
So you lived in the office?
Yeah, and it's kind of weird. Now we have a CEO shadow program, so there's 2 people from the company in working from my living room.
Yeah, they're here somewhere, right? That's all the way back there. They picked the right week because they got to travel to Vancouver with you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week.
Yeah. I want to talk about that shadow program. Let's talk about that remote part for a second. What were the positives for you to make that a company-wide, just this is institutionalized, we are completely remote?
I think it really helps if you have no people at an HQ. Nobody else feels like they're at a satellite office. We hire a lot of people who say, I work in an amazing company, but I'm the one remote, and all the decisions get made at HQ, and I'm not involved. I hear about them later, etc. With GitLab, everyone's on the same level, and many times we even work in like public issue trackers so that people from the wider community are on the same level with us. And I think that's a great enabler. And I think it's really hard to run a hybrid company. So just having everyone remote and me just working by myself, and same for all the other execs, makes that difference where everyone's equal.
Yep. You work basically from an office at home?
Yeah, I have a bedroom, I have a green screen behind it, and that's where I work from.
Interesting. And what are the negatives, though? At some point, you might want to get everybody together in a room. There's still value to being face-to-face, right?
Yeah, I think you got to organize the informal communication. So informal communication is something that happens naturally if you're co-located. But co-location comes at a great expense. It comes at an expense of talent, that you cannot hire, and people commuting and having to maintain an office. So you got to make sure you allocate that time for people getting to know each other. So every day of the week, we have a group conversation where a department talks about what they're doing. Every work day, we have coffee breaks where people just do 25 minutes with someone else without an agenda. Every day we have breakout calls where you're with a group and you talk about things outside of work. That costs valuable time, but that's time you would have spent anyway, and you're saving the commute. Plus, yeah, there should be some trust building to getting to know each other. And we designed for that, and I think then you can mitigate a lot of the downsides.
Sure. Do you do any of these annual offsites?
Yeah, we do.
Like that?
Every 9 to 12 months, we bring everyone together. And it's super fun. The last time was in New Orleans. And we try to not do death by PowerPoint. So there's an opening and a closing ceremony. But for the rest, it's all excursions, just exploring together.
Well.
And unconference. So individual contributors, they suggest something to talk about. And then with a group of 15 people, you talk about that. No presentations, no slideshows. So it's really using that time what it's best for, stuff we really cannot do during the rest of the year.
When people come to and start at GitLab, most companies, you get like an orientation and you get your package, things like that. You can't really do any of that. What's it like getting onboarded at GitLab then? You just sit in my office with my green screen at home and...
Yeah, you do. And you get an issue assigned to you, and there's about 250 checkboxes. So we onboard a lot better than other companies, but it's pretty intense. Instead of 2 days, it probably takes you 2 to 4 weeks to get to all the different tasks that are assigned. The advantage is you learn a lot more. So instead of a two-day or a week-long onboarding where you still need 100 shoulder taps where you have to ask someone, you get a lot more information. We have a company handbook. It has over 3,000 pages with all the information. We kind of guide you to the parts that are relevant.
Let me just put a point on that. I didn't read through the whole handbook, but it's 3,000 pages of material.
Yeah,
How did that happen? What went wrong there?
I don't like repeating myself. And after Y Combinator, we set this ambition to be not a company of 50 people, but of 500, 5,000 people in the future. I'm like, wow, if I can say something, but I will have to repeat it many, many times. I'm going to write it down. So we started writing it down. So now if you want to communicate something in GitLab, it changed. You don't send an email, you don't do a PowerPoint, you don't do a Slack message. You change it in the handbook, and then you put a link to that change in email or in Slack or anywhere else. And it's really kind of the operating system of the company.
And that handbook is pretty much open source, right?
It is open source. It's Creative Commons. So you can copy it. You can copy relevant parts. For example, we have a global compensation calculator. So if you want to know what we pay in 200 locations all over the world, you can use that as a reference. But all of the things you can incorporate yourself.
It's on GitHub. How did that happen?
No, it's on GitLab. I think the only thing that we still have on GitHub is a mirror for GitLab itself, but the canonical source is on GitLab.
Got it. Do you find that everybody reads all those 3,000 pages?
Nobody does, and that's fine. You don't need to know everything in a company. It's more that when you're interested in something, you can read about it, and most importantly, when you want to change something, you change that relevant part.
How many people are you now in the company?
We're 800 people. We're grown from 400 to 1,100 people this year.
How do you scale that?
A lot of recruiting, a lot of telling people about GitLab. In the last 3 months, we got 20,000 people that applied to GitLab. Being great at onboarding and making everyone effective quickly.
You don't do any interviews yourself anymore, do you?
I am on 5 interview panels right now.
Wow.
And I did all the last interviews up till 140 people, and up to 600 people, I reviewed every last hiring packet.
Wow. Since you can't bring people in for face-to-face interviews, or do they come to your house?
Sometimes, especially if they're in the Bay Area, it's such a low-cost thing, so then they tend to come by. And
you cook them a good Dutch meal?
Yeah, it's a bit awkward to invite people over to your house, but we have a ruse. We made a data wall with 6 65-inch monitors that display our latest dashboards and things like that. So people come in, they forget about being in my living room. They're like, wow, that's interesting. And we talk about that, and that's a good opening.
That's your living room?
Yeah, I have a very accommodating wife, if you couldn't tell, living with 8 guys in a house in Mountain View for 3 months and still getting married afterwards. So she's been great also, about the shadows in our living room.
Well, yeah, of course, they're shadows, so they go home at night, though, don't they?
They do. Okay. It's also for their sake.
Glad to hear that. When you're doing the recruiting, do you find that there are employees who just can't work with the remote system that you have? It just doesn't work out for them? And who are they? And is there patterns to it?
It's much lower than you'd think. We thought okay, this remote is going to be a thing. We have to interview for that. Turns out not to be the case. We do interview for manager of one. We need people who can work independently. but that's the same as any other fast-growing company. You want people who can manage themselves to a great extent, who don't need day-to-day hand-holding. If they can do that, they can work that way. It is a change, though. So we hire people who are very ambitious, and then in the first few weeks, they have to learn how to work with GitLab and other things, and it slows them down, and it's frustrating them. So the first month is hard, but it's not hard in the sense that people quit. People stick with it, and they get better. They get through it. It's just not, it's a tough thing to kind of, you've worked for 10, 20 years, now you have to start doing things differently.
Sure. Now, part of what makes it maybe worth for them is to stick around is that you will probably IPO.
Yeah, we hope to
near future.
We hope to become a listed company on November 18, 2020.
That you're pretty much on track, you're good to go, roadshow, everything is set up?
No, we're not there yet, but we did a non-deal roadshow recently, and we're on track. We're ahead of where we wanted to be. We made a plan in 2015 to get to this point, and we're ahead of that.
Did you actually set the date in 2015?
Yeah, we publicized in 2015 that we wanted to become a public company in 2020.
But not the exact date of
Not
November
the date
18th.
that we put in last year.
When I talked to Mark from Smartsheet earlier on, we talked a lot about how, for a lot of entrepreneurs, an IPO is kind of a goal to work towards. Is that the same for you, or do you feel like, okay, it's just another milestone for us?
Yeah, it's both. It's a goal, but if you go to our leadership page at the bottom, it will have a link to about how we talk about being a public company. It says it's like graduating from high school. It's a great day, but it shouldn't be the biggest thing you achieve in life. And we already set goals for 2023. We want to be at $500 billion in revenue and a couple of other goals by that time. So the closer we get, the more we'll start looking past it.
Did you say 500 billion?
Million.
Million, okay, good, because I would have had to have a talk with you if you said a billion. Where are you now?
We're below 100 million right now.
Okay, so it's pretty aggressive.
It is, but the growth rate, I think the growth rate right is 140% year over year.
But you are working in the competition is heating up in your space.
A bit, but I think what's happening is that our space is going from you choose many separate DevOps tools to you pick one DevOps tool, and we're the leading single application. So I think more and more we're becoming a leader. But this consolidation is starting to happen, and it will attract more attention. But what other companies don't have is they don't have an open source model. So we have thousands of people who contributed to the code base, and over the last half year, the number of improvements by the wider community increased from 100 to now 200 a month. So that's kind of a wind in our back that others can match.
Sure, sure. But on the other hand, you've got Microsoft competing with you with buying GitHub. They buy GitLab, let me know. GitHub, and with, you've got Atlassian, you've got big public companies competing with you.
Yeah, that was also the case when we started it, and despite that, we've been able to gain market share, and we're still gaining market share on most or all of them.
Got it. Now, do you expect you'll buy a recreational submarine when you?
I'm not sure.
Maybe a second house so you can have your fake living room?
We have a few things at GitLab I'd like to take more advantage of. So we have a travel stipend. So if you visit people in other countries, we'll pay for part of the cost. So we've got a lot of people kind of traveling over the world, visiting other GitLabers in person. So I'd rather do that.
Okay, so that's part of that. And you've got your shadows, obviously. Can you just say a few words about what that program is about? Because I think it's pretty unique. Yeah,
it's a way to give managers at GitLab an overview of the entire company. Because as we get bigger, you tend to focus more on your functional area. And this way they can see all my meetings with sales, with marketing, with external people. They can form a picture of the entire company.
And basically they live with you.
They don't live with me, but during the workday, they're with me. They attend about 90% of my meetings. And it's a 2-week program, so they do that for 2 weeks and then go back to the regular job.
Got it. What are those 10% of meetings they're not allowed into?
It's when the other party says, I don't feel comfortable with that. Mostly applicants for a role.
Sure, makes sense. Do those shadows tend to go on to leadership roles in the end, or what?
Mostly they are already in leadership roles, and they tend to be the more ambitious people. So they're a lot of fun to hang out with. All
right, very good. Maybe they will buy one of your recreational submarines.
Yeah, I hope so.
I want to buy a recreational submarine now. It's my goal in life since I'm not going to IPO. So, thank you.
Thank you for the interview. Appreciate it.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.